Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your attending the business committee this evening. I'll call the meeting to order. And it's with great respect and humility that we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Snuneymuxw people. The Snuneymuxw people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. I will say that just so that everyone at home is aware, I am struggling a little bit with technology this evening, so you may see me transfer over between accounts here, but I'm doing my best this evening. So moving on, are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order to the agenda this evening? And I'll ask Vice Chair O'Neill to please help me with the chat because I'm not able to see that.
Sounds good. There's nothing in the chat.
Thank you. So hearing none, I'll move on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any? Moved by Trustee O'Neill.
Seconded by Trustee Barron.
Oh, sorry, seconded by Trustee Barron. If I could request that, just based on the fact I can't see the chat window, if you could please either maybe perhaps raise your hand and we'll try that and see how that works this evening. Thank you. So that the agenda is approved. Moving on to approval of the minutes of the business committee held February the 10th, 2021, and the special business committee held on February the 17th, 2021. Moved by Trustee Stanley. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Berzovich. Thank you. I appreciate the hands as well. It brings you up on my screen. Thank you. Is there any trustees that are opposed to the adoption of the minutes? Not seeing anyone on my screen. I'll just double check with Trustee O'Neill. Is there anyone opposed in the chat?
No.
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill. Moving on to section 7, there are no presentations this evening. And moving on to the senior staff reports, we do have a few this evening. The first one is from Executive Director of Planning and Operations, Pete Sabo, and Energy Manager Rob Lumsden. Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Chair Keller. I'm just going to briefly kick the presentations off, but to start, generally this evening, the board is going to get to see some really stellar work that's adapting and responding to the board's and community's goals. And you're going to see that throughout the presentations this evening. And so before we start at all, I just want to recognize the work of our facilities team in getting information ready and the work that they're doing in this regard. So Mr. Sabo will, I'm sure, do some other thank yous, but I just want to recognize that work at the get-go. And what you'll see in the first presentation is the board taking its resources to support its goals. And I think that that's really fundamental to keep in mind as Mr. Sabo and Mr. Lumsden make their presentation. And so really something to be applauded, the work that's happening right now, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Sabo perhaps.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Walsh. I have a special introduction tonight for Mr. Lumsden. As you may or may not be aware, Rob Lumsden is retiring on March 31st after approximately 33 years with the school district. It's my honor to thank Rob for his service on behalf of the district and management staff. Most of you know Rob as our energy manager. However, Rob has been much more to us during his time with the district. Rob has actually dedicated his career to the K-12 system, and it has been a pleasure to work with him in all of his different roles. Hired in 1988 as an electrician, Rob has held a number of different positions in the district, including electrical foreman, assistant electrical general foreman of electrical, grounds, plumbing, and heating, and a short stint as acting maintenance manager before his current energy manager position. I called HR regarding all of Rob's assignments, and they responded to me, and I quote, that he has been around so long that we lost the paper trail. Ensuring electrical safety and electrical functionality of schools has been a big part of Rob's role over the years, a task which is not insignificant. Thank you, Rob, for looking out for the safety of our students, staff, and buildings. Rob, your training, experience, and good-natured personality has been very beneficial to the district, and I wanted to thank you for making NLPS as your career choice. Thanks, Rob.
Wow, thank you very much, Pete. I appreciate that. Wasn't expecting that right away, but it's been rewarding being part of a productive, close-knit team in facilities. And I know we lots of quality work comes out of this area. There's some very dedicated people here. So glad to be part of that team. Okay. Karen, can you go to the first slide, please? Next slide. This is, okay, through the chair. Good evening, everyone. I am Rob Lumsden, the energy manager. There's construction work going on in the background, so I'll try talking really loud. This is the environmental upgrade sheet that we use to track projects. These projects are compared for value in terms of GHG reduction and upgrading of aging infrastructure in the district. Priorities are set and synergies with other capital projects are examined. Then the projects are put forward for approval. Next slide, please. This table shows our GHG reduction progress in the district since 2010. It includes carbon emissions from paper, building fuels, and vehicle fuels. COVID ventilation efforts that we put in process this year and added floor space will have a negative effect on reductions. So we're using more ventilation air this year, and that means we have to use more natural gas to heat it, and so we're going to have a bigger carbon footprint this year because of that. To meet our goals, we need to advance the rate of GHG reducing projects, and to reach government targets, the primary source of heat must be heat pump technology or electric. 80% reductions of carbon are possible through heat pumps. Next slide, please. We are preparing for delivery of 2 zero-emission buses. The slide on the left shows BC Hydro putting in a new pole for us. And the slide on the left shows some of the underground work that took place. Next slide. The performance of the buses will be monitored by the bus manufacturer and School District 68. The charging characteristics will be monitored by NLPS and BC Hydro to avoid extra demand charges. And this is a pilot program that we're in with BC Hydro. So the picture on the left actually shows some of the metering devices so that we can record when the buses are charging and how much power they're taking. And we can modulate the power. We can just say you can only charge from 6 p.m. till midnight, and yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. So we have a built-in capacity of a fleet of 10 zero-emission buses. Breakers are on the left there. The power shed was built by district carpenters, and it has the same size electrical service as Cordaway School. Next slide, please, Karen. The buses are set to arrive in the next 2 weeks. Driver training still needs to be done. Mechanics need to be familiarized with the equipment, but the seat belt pilot project is ready to go. Communications are ongoing with Ministry of Education for fleet expansion. That concludes the slideshow. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lumsden. Did Mr. Sabo have anything further at this point?
I think through the chair, thank you. I think I would just want to thank Rob very much, and I've been out to visit the infrastructure that was created for the electric bus, and the thinking behind it and the work behind it is quite exemplary. And I'm very proud of the work that it's been accomplished out of Rob's department on this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you again to both Mr. Sabo and Mr. Lumsden. I'd just like to say that I was lucky enough to have Mr. Walsh take me on a tour of the facilities department, and it was very impressive with all the work and the projects that are currently underway. So again, thank you very much. I know that we have some questions. I'm going to have to do things a little bit differently tonight, just based on the way I'm sharing the meeting with my cell phone. So I ask that we'll give this a try, and can trustees try to use the raise hand feature, and hopefully I'll be able to see everybody on my screen, and then I'll do my best to call you in order. If I get you out of order, I apologize. I'll do my best. So I believe the first that came up was Trustee Stanley, and then Trustee Berzevic. So if Trustee Stanley, if you would like to go ahead with your question, I hope I got that right.
Thank you. I actually just had a hard time logging on myself. So thank you for the presentation, Mr. Lumsden. Thank you for all of your work and dedication. I might have been a big thorn in your side, or someone who made your life really exciting, because I've definitely been one of the motivators for environmental changes. So put me back on the list, because I've got another question, but you said a quote, and I want to verify this because it was so exciting. Did you say that 80% reduction of something is possible through heat bumps? Can you say that again so I understand what that piece of information was?
Sure, I can. Through the chair. Yeah, so basically, whenever we look at doing a boiler upgrade on a school, basically, if we do a condensing boiler upgrade, we know we're going to save 20% on greenhouse gases. But if we went to, it's called low carbon electrification, so heat pump technology as a primary source of heat, yeah, 80% reductions of the carbon footprint of that school are possible. The only thing I would caution you on is heat pumps are usually good down to 5 degrees Celsius or down to 0 degrees Celsius. You still need another backup source of heat, and that has to be natural gas still. So moving forward, we are trying to, any boiler upgrade that we do, we are trying to consider a heat pump to go with it, and it's just basically it's cost. It's cost is what's important there.
Thank you. I am familiar with heat pumps. We have one, but the number of 80% is significant, more than I had expected. So that is profound. So thank you for that bit of information, and I will myself back on the list to ask you one more question while we have you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Stanley, if I may, just, oh, sorry, go ahead, Trustee O'Neill. She's helping me today with the speakers list.
It can wait. I just want to get some clarification after about process.
Okay. Thank you. So Trustee Stanley, I'll just check. Did you have a follow-up? I know I've added you back to the list, but just to make sure that with respect to this question, that you are satisfied. I'll take that as a yes. Okay. Oh, there she is.
No, were you asking me if I had a follow-up?
Correct. Yes.
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So the next on our list, and actually, before we go there, I see that Trustee O'Neill has a process question, I believe. I'll let that go next, please.
Thank you. And it's in relation to how we're conducting our questions here, Chair Keller. And You've mentioned for us to use the raise hand feature. A number of us cannot find if it exists. I think that might be the Zoom forum that has that option. So just for clarification, are you asking that the trustees sort of physically show themselves and raise their hand? Or
I think for tonight, we're going to have
to question. Okay.
Sorry for interrupting. Yes, I'll just reiterate, and I appreciate that you asked that question. And again, we're doing things a little bit differently this evening. So if you would like to speak, please turn on your camera momentarily, raise your hand, and I'll acknowledge you with a head nod. And if Trustee O'Neill could please help me and just let me know if there's any questions from anyone in the chat as we go along. Thank you. So the next on our list is Trustee Berzovic. So if you could please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will get through this together. First of all, questions, Mr. Lumsden. First, sir, I just want to wish you all the best and thank you for all of your incredible service to our district throughout all these numbers of years. My question is about the buses. Just in terms of the battery life, what is the battery life going to, do we know what the battery life will be like on these electric buses?
Through the chair, yes, we do. The expected lifespan, when we were building our business case to begin with, that was Pete, Dave, and I. The expected lifespan of battery electric bus batteries is 12 years.
Okay. And if I can have a follow-up?
Yes, go ahead, Trustee Berzovic.
Now, I just want to make sure I understand. I mean, those, if the battery needed, we would just replace the battery. Would we replace the battery or would we replace the bus when we got to that point? Do you think?
Through the chair, actually, we would just replace the batteries.
Okay.
One thing that's favorable of a battery bus over a diesel bus is there are a lot less moving parts. So there's no transmission in an electric bus. And so maintenance fees should be saved year after year.
Okay.
And yeah, at the end of 12 years, you just change the battery out.
Okay, thank you. And my apologies if I'm sure you may have shared some of this with us before. I'm just so not mechanically inclined that I have trouble keeping that information in my head. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Trustee Berzovic. And I have Trustee Stanley back on the list. So go ahead, Trustee Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. So this question is to, I'm not sure to whom it should be directed, but there was in the report a really impressive quote, and I want to understand it a little bit more, and that is that a culture of energy management has clearly been established in the facilities department. That's a music to my ears, frankly, but a really profound statement, meaning it sounds like, I mean, how do you shift culture in less than a year? That is a feat. And I do want to understand it a little bit more. I think this report is telling us the effect of that change, so that the changes that have occurred. But can you give me a little bit of a story of what the culture was like, or what the change, what does that mean? So how did it change? Because I'm in awe. I'm deeply grateful, but I'm in awe that department has managed to shift gears, direction in such a short period of time.
Through the chair, perhaps I could get started and pass it over to Rob. It's been more than a year, I think, that of experience that we have with respect to that statement. And I can say that early on, when I started with the district, when we were reviewing the drawings for the construction of Dover Bay Secondary, staff at the time were applying for BC Hydro grants for energy reduction projects so that we could reduce the amount of electricity used. That culture's continued within the district, and we've always considered energy management, and it seeped through all the other departments now after 3 decades, to the point where virtually no infrastructure project gets considered without somebody being involved asking, is there a way we can do this that will be lower energy consumption? I think one of the best markers of it is that a number of years ago, in working with BC Hydro through their partner program, they bring in an expert to come in and speak with us and ask us a series of questions and have a dialogue with respect to a number of different items that BC Hydro is concerned about. And they've charted that over a number of years. So that individual has been back to the district a number of times. And through that process, he has pointed out to us that we have one of the best, we have managed to put an energy management culture into place in the district. And I'll pass it off to Rob because he has some more information through his organization that he works with his other BC Hydro managers.
Sure. Well, one thing I was going to say that I sit in on the projects meeting every Thursday morning with the other managers and tradesmen, and everything has to pass the litmus test of being sustainable or energy efficient. The Dover Bay Building Envelope program, people came to me about what type of windows to purchase or what did I have any input on insulation. Maintenance, anytime maintenance has a failure of a hot water tank or of a furnace or any other type of equipment, they come down here first for to check if we have any ideas of what they should be purchasing. And you know, I'm in on meetings with energy managers from around the province weekly, and we talk about new technology and new projects. So we try and be educated and give it good advice.
Great, thank you. And did Trustee Stanley have a follow-up to her question?
Just to thank you for the correction of my misperception and the history there, but as well, I can't help but think it's still a significant achievement, and I'm you know, dare I say proud, but honored to be able to witness this. I think that there is an opportunity for the rest of the district, but also, you know, teachers and education. There's an education lesson here. And so I just want to throw that notion out there that the process of change that you've experienced throughout these decades, as you mentioned, I think obviously we will look to you as leaders for the district about how we can affect change across the district, but also, you know, from an educational perspective, learn from that process of change. So I just kind of want to add that I see a lot of merit in learning from your history there. So hopefully, Rob, we can, you know, get you to write a memoir before you go. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question, but I just want to check with Trustee O'Neill if there are any other questions in the chat before I go ahead.
I guess I should say it. My head looked like it wasn't shaking properly. No.
Okay, thank you. I might be asking you that a few times this evening, so thank you for your help. So my question is, you know, just linking to Trustee Stanley's comment about the educational opportunities in relation to all the work that our facilities department is doing, both with respect to energy, water use, sustainability initiatives. Do we have or are we working towards some kind of an online portal where students and teachers can go to see real-time energy use, to look at, you know, different metrics of our initiatives and get a sense of how we're doing and how the actions that they might be doing in school have an impact?
To the chair, in the past we have, I mean, Dover Bay a dozen years ago had a solar array put on their roof, and then they had to monitor it with it in the front window of the office, and people could walk by there and look and see how many kilowatt hours of electricity were saved. That's and then again in the past we had 3 systems we put in for solar water preheating for the domestic hot water. And again, I know there was a portal at one time, but I'm not sure it's being maintained right now, Chair Keller. This is slightly off topic, but in the past, we piloted a networked irrigation system, and that has now become commonplace that our grounds department puts in. And then out of that, the excitement of a couple of guys on the grounds crew that have taken over that technology and seen the results is one way, I guess, that we're educating not students but our co-workers here.
Thank you very much. And I also see that Mr. Sabo had put up his hand there. So if you'd like to follow up there, please go ahead, Mr. Sabo.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. We haven't spent as much time. We have had some initiatives, as Rob has indicated, where we had portals available in specific schools. I know the Dover Bay Solar Array was linked to our website at one time. There probably is more energies that could be put towards that type of initiative in working with the Department of Learning Services to demonstrate real energy savings. I know we also have an energy metrics program that we use where we track all of our energy usage. We could probably convert that into something that could be put online so people could see like the total district's energy use and the different fuels and the decline, et cetera. So that's something that we will take under advisement as we move forward with respect to the integration of some of the goals and policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So not seeing any more questions or hands up at this point. I'll thank you again for both your service and your presentation. It was much appreciated, and all the great things that you've accomplished over the years. So thanks again. And I see that Superintendent Saywell has come up and may want to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I just, as well, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Rob for his 33 years of service and dedication to Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. Rob, your expertise and commitment to the school district as an electrician, a foreman, and now an energy manager is going to be missed. The district's definitely better with you in it. I know trustees join me in congratulating you on a very successful career, and we all wish you the very best in your retirement. Take care, and maybe we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So we will move on to item 8.2, Manager of Transportation, Dave Prevost, with our transportation route review.
Sure. And Mr. Chair.
Ms. Walsh? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm just going to briefly open us off if that's okay. So this evening, Mr. Prevost is going to present the transportation review along with Mr. Sabo. Mr. Sabo is going to kick us off with a few happy words, but unhappy words at the same time for Mr. Prevost. But also, at the end of the presentation and prior to questions and potential motions with respect to direction, I'd just like to maybe add a little bit at the end about the process about how we got to the kind of final conclusions of this report. So I'll jump on at the end before that, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few words, and again, a little bit of a different kind of introduction. So, as you may or may not be aware, Mr. Prevost is retiring on June 30th of this year after 20 years in his current position. And it is my honor to thank David for his service on behalf of the district and management staff. David's dedication to the students of Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools has been evident since his first day with the district. Always on the end of the phone when needed, or calling me at 5 a.m. with one of the countless road conditions reports with advice on running buses or not on a snowy day. And Dave, if I think you stuck around one more year, we might get that call right. David, your leadership in the transportation department in working with your dispatchers, drivers, mechanics has resulted in safe and consistent transportation services to students. And that really says it all. Also, your work with respect to vehicle repair and replacement is noticeable in our fleet today. I think every bus, vehicle, and piece of equipment was purchased by you. And if it wasn't, it's so old then, we may ask you to take it with you when you go. It's not just busing and equipment that you put your organization skills to. You also looked after our courier and cartage services, moving small packages all the way up to entire high schools. I've always appreciated your ability to stop and take the time to ask people how their day was and remember a personal detail they shared with you in the past. something that has left an impression upon me. I know I speak for many when I say thanks for your fellowship and leadership as part of the facilities management team. You have been a workplace brother, and we wish you well in retirement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate that. And it's been my honor and pleasure to work with the district for this amount of time. I certainly value your guidance and leadership through the 20 years I've been here as well. And I can't thank you enough, Peter. You're an amazing manager to report to. So like I said, my time with the district, I've enjoyed almost every minute of it. It's been great times, a lot of good times, a lot of learning experiences, growing experiences, and I've always tried to work and do what was best for the district. So thank you so much, Peter. It's been my pleasure to work with you and the district as a whole. So thank you.
So David, if you wanted to proceed with an overview of your, I think it's now your 4th annual route review, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, Pete. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So through the chair, I will provide a brief overview of the 2021 annual bus route review. I think most of the trustees were here for the last year's overview of that one as well. So similar things applied. So all bus routes were reviewed as per AP 512. Those under 50% were very, very closely reviewed. And due to COVID, our ridership this year is down by about 29%. And normally we would make some sort of recommendations of route changes and alterations, that sort of thing, due to that lowered ridership. So this year, of course, we're not due to COVID because we don't know what will happen next year. So we're not looking at making any major route changes based on the lowered ridership. So we look at the average registered eligible riders compared to bus capacity. So our bus capacity is like 56 secondaries for an 84 passenger bus, and of course 84 elementary students could fit in that bus, or 73 for a combined load. We also have our 2 new seatbelt buses, not new now, they've been in place for a year and a half, that will carry 77 elementaries and 50 secondary students. So we look at ridership percentages by route and by percentage. In consideration of recommendations, staff take into account eligible versus ineligible riders or courtesy riders, student safety, which is hazardous walk conditions, distances, that sort of thing, transportation assistance versus the cost of a trip or route, and service levels, ride times, bus stop locations, stop times, and any other available options. So those are sort of the things we look at, and you can on the action sheet, you can see that there was provided some ridership numbers, registered ridership numbers. We did a 2019-20 comparison to 2021, and you can see there's 1,302 riders in 1920 and only 930 in 2021. So ridership is definitely down on all routes. So through the annual bus route review, we're making one recommendation, and it's courtesy service reduction recommendation. It would be for bus route 16. That's a dedicated bus route to Frank Ney, and the savings would be approximately $50,000 per year. This courtesy bus service is considered in place for convenience reasons due to school closure of Rutherford Elementary. Based on determining factors of the annual bus route review, bus route 16 should be considered for elimination. Approximately 51% of the students we transport are considered courtesy riders. So we transport a pretty large number of courtesy riders. There's really 3 categories of courtesy riders. One is really non-safety within safe walk limits of the school, safety reasons within unsafe walk limits of the school, and for convenience. So for those not entitled to bus service, they're either within walk limits or outside of they're attending a school outside of their catchment area, and bus service is available, so they hop on the bus, that sort of thing. So I wanted to give a brief overview of my consideration of courtesy riders in my 20 years here. So when it came to the district, the only courtesy service with related costs in place was for safety reasons, largely for Seaview, Mountain View, and Pleasant Valley. These schools have major highway crossings, no sidewalks, minimal streetlights, and minimal available RDN transit system. So now for what I consider convenience reasons, we have more courtesy service that comes with fairly high costs. So in Further to that, I'm going to defend AP 512. That's my Bible, you know, and I rely on that every day, just about when dealing with bus service requests. And certainly when those requests come in, I refer to AP 512 and the walk limits within it and that sort of thing. And you know, it's been made very clear to me that I have to follow AP 512, which is, like I said, it's something that I endeavor to do. And it gets difficult when there's bus service being put in place that's outside of board policy. So, you know, similar to Frank Ney bus route, you know, that one is totally outside of what I consider our AP 512. The other bit of service I would consider completely out of AP 512 would be the service from Ladysmith area to Cole North Oyster due to the closure of Davis Road. So, you know, I would like to say largely that I think that the district is setting ourselves up for some difficulties in the future. And in that, I say we, you know, like every time I deal with a parent and a student, I have to be fair and equitable. And to me, there's many areas that are similar or worse conditions than the students see between Rutherford, the old former Rutherford catchment and Frank Ney catchment, that do not have bus service. And I could name off quite a few areas that I consider that far worse than what the students have between Rutherford and Frank Ney. You know, largely they have sidewalks, crosswalks, streetlights. You know, there are some areas that might be difficult, but largely they also have available RDN transit. But you know, so that's largely why I'm trying to defend AP 512, because it gets more and more difficult when parents call and they want bus service. They're aware, a lot of them are aware that we're providing service, you know, within you know, like 3 kilometers of a school in town that have, you know, most of the safety features that a lot of rural areas do not have. So really, like I said, I have to defend AP 512, and I use it as a Bible. I use it regularly and go from there. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the service to Frank Ney. You know, while I enjoy having the extra bus route on, it gives more employment to my staff, and I enjoy that, and they enjoy that. I've always felt that this service should have been offered for 7 years at the most, like we've done in other schools, other school closure events, similar to Harewood School going to Quarterway. We gave them bus service for 7 years. We were planning on giving the bus service from, I believe, from Ladysmith area to Cole North Oyster for 7 years as well. But somewhere along the line that was made permanent as well, I do believe. So these are the types of things that, you know, we do not bus to any other specialty programs such as French immersion, sports academies, anything like that. So for us to bus this select group from Ladysmith or from Rutherford catchment, it makes it very difficult for me to do my job and defend AP 512 and use it to my advantage when I need it. So it gets more and more difficult, again, with these types of decisions that are being made. So a lot of this, you know, because 51% of our ridership is courtesy riders, we have some transportation department budget pressures. We've pretty well been consistently over budget. The pressures are largely in our gas and oil and supplies accounts. As indicated in the information sheet, there's really 4 options to correct that deficit in transportation. And I know I've talked to Pete. It gets really difficult as a manager to report a deficit year after year after year. It's actually kind of depressing. You know, every time I got to do a budget forecast, I have to put up with ribbing from the likes of Brian Hackwood and that sort of thing for being over budget. That's good fun, but at the same time, it is honestly a little bit depressing when a person has to report a budget deficit every year. So, you know, if the district would look at the courtesy riders and maybe start to minimize some of that service, that would definitely reduce the budget and put it back on track. So certainly that's something that, you know, is not going to happen in my time, but certainly should be looked at in the future. And that's just my advice as I'm going out the door type of thing is I think it's very important to the district to take a look at that service and try to determine whether it's in best interest. You know, perhaps we should be charging for courtesy service, not charge the regular riders. You know, there are different options in the structures to implement busing fees. So, you know, I think the district really needs to look at either implementing busing fees for just courtesy riders or look at eliminating some service to get the budget back on track and get the district back on track as well. Because like I said, it's fairness and equitableness to the district. When I put in a bus stop or somebody wants a bus stop, I always have to think, the next person that calls, I'm going to have to grant that same service if I grant the service to this person. So, it makes it very difficult for me when people start calling me in my office and wanting bus service, and they're well aware of the service we're providing. And like I said, it just gets more and more difficult to defend AP 512. So just trying to set up, a little bit of interest in doing something towards the transportation department for the next transportation manager that comes in behind me. So, I'll be honest with you, I've thoroughly enjoyed my time in the district. These little things are, while they can be difficult at times, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy my job and working for the district. So next steps in the transportation annual bus route review, is the information is being presented tonight. Transportation would publish any bus route changes in mid-June as per past practice. And of course, publishing can cause confusion on the current routes. We would update the routes on the website, and then bus route changes would start in September 2021, and then staff would monitor any feedback. And so that's largely it for my thing. One thing I would like to say also is in the information sheet on page 3, I believe it is, it says we have current 19 regular bus routes, not including the special needs bus routes. That is an error. The 19 routes do include our 4 special needs routes. So we have 15 regular bus routes and 4 special needs. So that's it for my presentation. And I look forward to answering any questions that may be made.
Great. So I just want to. Sorry, someone has the speakers on here. I'm getting a bit of an echo. So we have a few people on the speakers list. Thank you. And I want to just give staff. I see that Mr. Sabo and Mr. Walsh are both up on the screen. And just for confirmation, then we also have Trustee McKay and Mr. Zveer. So I'm not sure who wants to go first from staff, but
sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you, Mr. Prevost. I've had a great education in bus and transportation from you since I've arrived, so I much appreciate it. Just one of the things that we've had a number of concerns, and boy, that got out there really fast, the report, which is good for a responsive community. And I just wanted to tell the board just a couple of things to hopefully proactively respond to a couple of concerns. So just first is we did not go out to the potentially impacted community in advance of the board meeting because we thought that it was most important to come to the board first to talk about the direction that we were intending. And the second one is the reason, and it could have gone either way. The reason that it's not a recommended motion to remove the NA route in here, rather it's saying that we would take it away, is the point that Mr. Prevost was making with respect to the route not being pursuant to the AP. And so the idea would be is that after this meeting, barring a motion, that we would go to the community and we would, talk to the community about the reasons and the thinking and potentially alternatives. And then we would come to the board at budget time and the board would ultimately vote on it at budget time. So I just wanted that was the thinking behind the reason that there's not a motion that says remove the route. So I'm also happy to assist in any questions that are asked.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. So perhaps what we'll do is I saw that Mr. Saba would also like to speak, and maybe we'll allow him to speak and before moving on. So
thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment and thank Mr. Prevost. In the rewriting of the AP, Dave Prevost was instrumental in bringing forward the criteria and the methodology for the route review, and has now had a few years of implementing that route review. And you can see the level of detail that Dave has, an understanding of the routes and the passion that he holds for the admin policy and the daily implementation of it. And I just wanted to again thank Dave for his efforts and his contributions to the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Sabo, and thanks again, Mr. Prevost. So on our speakers list, we have Trustee McKay, Mr. Zvier, and Trustee O'Neill. So please go ahead, Trustee McKay.
Thank you. I have so many thoughts. My first thought, I have to start with this, is that I have so much respect for the work that you've done over the years, Dave. I've always enjoyed sitting next to you, working beside you, learning from you. Every time I've had that opportunity, I've appreciated the time and always this calm, thoughtful approach and your methodology. You always put that at the forefront. And so I just want you to know how much I respect that and how much I'm going to miss you, because I've always enjoyed just being able to spend a little bit of time with you as well. Now, this is going to be just a little bit more difficult for me to say what's coming next, because I do respect you so much and I understand all of the rationale that you've shared with us this evening. And so I feel a little bit guilty about this, but I also feel like it's what I need to do. So I'm going to move a recommendation for the board that the business committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, include bus route number 16 as a regular route in its transportation busing plan, and that this route remain a regular route until such time that the annual transportation review identifies a ridership below 50% of bus capacity.
Thank you, Trustee McKay. Do we have a seconder? I see that Trustee Brzovic has seconded the motion. Would you like to motivate the motion, Trustee McKay?
Yes, thank you. You know, there's been this route in particular, you know what, I recognize everything that Mr. Prevost said this evening is accurate. It is outside of the bounds of our typical policy and our typical procedures for implementing buses. I also recognize that it was brought on as a component of a school closure, and I think that that carries a little bit of weight for trustees in order to make decisions around it. One of the things that always felt a little bit different about this route for me was that when we did the active transportation committee work, a potential bus route consideration by SD 68 was one of the recommendations that came out of that active transportation plan. And you know, it doesn't necessarily fit what we would typically be after in an active transportation plan, but it is what was identified as something that would work for the communities that were impacted. And so, you know, I understand staff's recommendation. I have a lot of respect for it. And you know what, I'll admit that this is, you know, there is some political pressures here around this decision as well for trustees, and that's our burden to bear for sure, and the impacts that it has on our budget. So I'm moving this motivation, or I'm motivating this motion with the intention of supporting the community, and just acknowledge that in general, I do look to busing as one of those factors that helps support. It reduces some of our vulnerabilities in various communities throughout the district, ensuring that kids get to school. And so with that, I'll close. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Prevost, for all your information.
Thank you, Trustee McKay.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee McKay. So I recognize that we have Mr. Zvier as our next speaker. I just want to confirm with our Secretary Treasurer Walsh to make sure that I'm following proper procedure by allowing Mr. Zvier to speak during motion.
I believe so. I'd have to look at the committee, but I think it's appropriate.
Okay, I see a Trustee McKay nodding her head as well. So thank you very much. So please, Mr. Zvier, go ahead. I just didn't want to get in trouble with procedures here.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and congratulations, Dave. As you say, both of us are getting out at a time, but I also got to say is, you know, doing this report during a COVID and during whatever, and bringing up and your recommendations about not touching other routes, but I do have to say that Route 16 was put in there with the idea that we closed the school that was uncomfortable for the people that lived there, and a small price for people to keep their kids in school at a cost $50,000 a year is not out of the norm for the other amounts that were saved due to the school. And it's a good thing in some ways, I guess, because the school's now going to be a swing school. Could have been different if something else had happened. But I can say is ridership may be down now, but the way Nanaimo was, and we just had a big forecast that Nanaimo's booming again, and populations are going everywhere. So possibility that people that move in those catchments that are courtesy riders, right, or riders on that bus, may be more in the future than they are currently right now. And I think that's going to be, our ridership's going to increase in our buses for a while as Nanaimo grows out. So, you know, COVID can't tell the numbers of bus riders right now. I believe once we turn back into a little more normal, our school buses will be back to capacity and probably even extend some runs. So I just got to say, as I hope, and I'm glad that Charlene brought up a motion. So.
Thank you, Mr. Spear. Next on the list is Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I don't know that I could have said it any better than Chair McKay did. And, you know, when you were expanding on this, and thank you so much for that, Mr. Prevost, because it really helps, you know, draw the picture aside from what we read on the paper here. And you really hit a spot for me when you talked about the equity piece, and, you know, immediately, you know, what we do for one, we do for all. And it is a very hard decision to make, a recommendation to make in this case. And, you know, I want you to know that I understand why, you know, the recommendation, where it came from. And I also note too that, you know, I read this quite clearly here that, you know, the business committee had an opportunity to otherwise direct and have this conversation. And so, you know, I'm gonna support this motion as well, but I think it will be helpful for us trustees going forward. This has been quite political. The way this has been raised is, you know, how are we going to be able to continue to make similar decisions moving forward? Because I don't know if this is going to be a practical long-term solution. So appreciate all the work that's been done here, and congratulations on the next phase, heading off into retirement.
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you. Trustee O'Neill, I'll ask just in case, but do you have a follow-up? I think that was more of a statement than a question, but that's okay.
It sure was a statement. No follow-up needed. Thanks.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Trustee O'Neill. So moving on to Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. I have a question for the mover of the motion, and then depending on that answer, a few thoughts. And so my question for the mover of the motion is, I believe, because I'm just looking at something that was sent to us about the motion, that you say a ridership below 50% of bus capacity. And my question is actually about, is that registered ridership or is that consistent ridership? Because that's a really different thing, which we have the ability to track.
Trustee McKay, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. Given that the entire route is essentially what we might call courtesy riders, it would be 50% of consistent use. Okay, thank you. That's an important detail for me, because I know we have run into situations in the past. It's one of the best things about the ZED Pass is that we have the ability, you know, people register their children to ride the bus, but then they don't always ride the bus, or they ride the bus one day a week. And that's a big burden for the district. And so I appreciate that clarity, that it's consistent ridership. And so, you know, one of the things that, and I also want to give out a shout out to Dave. I'm gonna miss you. Thank you. Thank you for your, you know, the AP on this, AP 5 something 12.
12, yes.
12, thank you. Is, you know, quite meaningful to me as well, because we created it to be a less blunt instrument in the last term, to sort of address some of those concerns what Trustee O'Neill was just talking about, you know, because it was so blunt. But one of the things that I think I have found as a result of it is that we did create something that did allow us to be more thoughtful about our bus routes. But what we didn't think of is the process of canceling a route. And what I have found is that
the lack of thought in that means that the process of canceling a route has become quite adversarial. It always was. It's not that it's become, it always was. And so what we hoped is that this would create the ability to be more nuanced and thoughtful about where we bus and how we bus, and that therefore it would be more thoughtful about canceling the routes, which I think we are. But the process, I think there's a problem with our process, which we didn't think of in AP 512. So I think we need to be, when going forward, I think what we need is to develop some better processes for canceling a route. And I think what that means is being more collaborative and supportive with the community, going to them and saying, like you've just done now, hey, since we put this route on, what we've noticed is that there's more sidewalks, they're much more consistent than they were, that there's more street lights, things like that. And then, you know, work collaboratively with the affected community to build safe routes, to make them feel safe, because that's a huge part of why people put their little people on the bus. And so, you know, and recognizing that we have a number of communities that don't have sidewalks. You know, kids live 4.5 kilometers. They don't have sidewalks. They might only have 14 streetlights in that. So they're, you know, our more rural communities might be disproportionately affected here. But I would like us to avoid that adversarial process. And so with that clarity from Trustee McKay, I am going to support her motion, because I think one of the things that we lacked in AP 512, I really believe in that, and I think it's really revolutionary for the whole province, that AP, is that we need to add something on being more collaborative and supportive with the communities when we are proposing to cancel a route. So I hope that what we can do is take this as an opportunity to work with the community to develop that process and make people feel like, you know, what you're seeing, Dave, what you see, and help the community see what you see, and also for us to see through the community's eyes where their tensions are, where their pinch points are, where their areas of concern are, and how we can work in with our relationships with the city in order to, and you know, active transportation now being part of the Ministry of Transportation, that's revolutionary. So let's work on these areas of concern that we're hearing about in all these letters, so that we can work towards your recommendation in a way that makes everybody feel better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson. So there's a few people on the list, just to confirm. I'm next, followed by Trustee Stanley and Trustee Robinson. So I'd just like to say thanks again, Dave, for your work. I think this was, there's a lot of memories, I would say, in our community with respect to the impacts that the closure of Rutherford has had. It's still living, unfortunately, and strong in our community. And one of the things that the school district was gracious enough to do is to provide busing. And that was something that made a difference in a number of families' lives. And looking at our ridership, it's high. I mean, we're doing great on that route. Probably, you know, it's in the top 2 or 3 in terms of ridership across our fleet. So it definitely goes to show you that there's a demand. There's obvious concern in our community around parents allowing their students to walk. So I support the motion, and I'm pleased that Trustee McKay brought the motion forward, and I will be speaking or voting in favor. And following consideration of the motion, I have a couple other notice of motions that I will be bringing forward related to the AP. So thank you very much. And I'll move on to our next speaker, Trustee Stanley.
Thank you. So, Mr. Prevost, I hear you, being from a rural community, I appreciate your considerations for equity. We have no sidewalks, we have no streetlights. Sometimes we have to dodge a pig, there's a very different environment, right?
Yes.
And cars don't necessarily go slow out here either. So I hear your words of caution. I do, because I see them every day. I don't know to what extent, and this is not necessarily a question for now, but maybe in this, grand consideration of this issue is to whatever extent the changing traffic patterns in Nanaimo and increasing traffic stress, which I thought I just escaped from moving from the Lower Mainland, but no. To what extent that affects active transportation, and that can be a conversation in the active transportation plan. Just kind of giving you some ideas, some considerations. I'm also very aware that this is COVID times, and that's for me as a factor as well. So I appreciate Trustee Higginson's thoughtful comments. I think she actually eloquently identified a core piece of the challenge that we are experiencing, the dilemma that I think trustees are experiencing here. And if I could ask for information from the mover of the motion, so Trustee McKay, you mentioned something about an active transportation plan, or that there was an active transportation review, and that part of that review came out a recommendation for, like, help me understand, give me a little bit more information. Were you saying that this particular area was identified? So I'm just asking for that information.
Sure.
Okay, so now it's through the chair, and I'll ask Miss Trustee McKay to please respond.
Yes, thank you. So to answer the question, through the active transportation work that was done as a component of the transition committee, busing was identified as a potential action that could be taken. So I believe there was several pages of recommendations that came out of that active transportation work. This was one of the recommendations that came from that committee work. I only have a draft myself. I would have to look to staff for the final version of what that document looked like at the time. It's a few years old now.
Trustee Stanley, did that satisfy your question?
If I could have a follow-up, please.
Yes, you may.
Do you know, or does anyone know if that recommendation was out of safety concerns?
Is there any staff or Trustee McKay, someone who may be able to respond? I see a hand up. Go ahead, Trustee McKay.
Thank you. Yes, it was recognized by RCMP, ICBC, the parents in the community, the staff that, school staff that participated in the active transportation committee that came to that recommendation together. I can't speak to our district staff's recommendation at that point. I think that their role was very much in a listening capacity to see what was compiled out of the report.
Thank you, Trustee McKay. Appreciate it.
Chair, could I just have a point of order?
About what? Yes, you may.
Thank you. There's a lot of commenting happening in the question. So I think what we need to do is provide the people who are watching with some instruction or understanding about what is the question period open for, and when questions will be answered, and that it's for questions as well. So just if you could, if as the chair, you could let people know how the question process works. Since we're live, since we're virtual, it's a bit different, but there's a lot of commenting, and then there's questions about when their questions will be answered. So I think our audience needs a little bit, just because it's so different than what it's been in the past. Thanks.
Okay, well, I'm gonna thank you, Trustee Higginson. I'll do my best, and I may ask Secretary Treasurer Walsh to assist. So we have a motion that's been seconded on the floor. We are currently debating the motion, and at this point, I welcome trustees' comments on the motion. If we have anyone who is asking questions in the questions section of the chat, we will provide opportunity for the public to ask questions during our question period. I'm assuming that, and maybe I'll ask Trustee O'Neill, are there questions being asked in the chat at this time?
There are not, but I've put my hand up if there's no speakers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, for clarification, in the public chat, the public Q&A, there are many questions being asked, and there are also many comments. So just for the public's awareness, the Q&A is treated the same way as if we were in a meeting. The time for questions is during the question period, as Trustee Keller said, at the end. So that's when people have the opportunity to ask questions, and the Q&A is only for questions. It's not for comments or public or opinion about comments that are being made during the meeting. It's simply for questions that will be answered in question period. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Trustee Higginson. And for those at home, I'm not able to see your questions at this time, so I'll be relying on staff to bring your questions forward at the appropriate question period, which is a little bit further down in our agenda. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. So moving on to our next speaker is Trustee Robinson.
Just a quick comment first to Dave. I have to apologize, Dave. There must have been a technical glitch somewhere on my laptop, because I didn't get the email I'm sure you sent me to ask my thoughts about your retirement. I'm sure you would have consulted with me before making a decision like that, but
I'm sorry you missed that email, Trustee Robinson.
But thanks for all your great work. I've enjoyed every minute I've spent with you.
And likewise, thank you so much.
And when I saw this motion, I think it was this afternoon, I thought that's a no-brainer to support this motion. I was part of the board, well, two boards, while student population was going down and down and down, and we were closing schools. I was part of closing Rutherford, and I walked to Frank J. Ney back way and the front way along the main road a couple of times each. It was a tough decision, so I was really supportive of the bus. But that little but, when the Secretary Treasurer spoke about what staff were going to do of approaching the community, working with the community, and coming back to us with a mutually agreed on solution and voting on it at our next meeting, that made sense to me rather than voting at this point. I will still probably support this motion, but I wish we had followed the Secretary Treasurer's, what would have been his approach and staff's approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Robinson. Next on the list is Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair Keller. I was actually going to call the question on the motion.
Hold on a moment here. We still have two speakers on our list who haven't had an opportunity to speak. So I would like them to have an opportunity. We have Trustee Berzovic and Trustee Barron, which are on our list and haven't had a chance to speak yet. So I'd like to hear from them first, if that's okay. Trustee Berzovic? You're muted, Tanya.
I support the motion. I'll be super brief. I won't repeat what everybody else has said, but I will say that one thing this does, I will grant that Mr. Prevost made a good point that it might be that at some point what we want to do is review AP 512 and make sure that it's still in line with what our values are, so that we don't find ourselves in too many of these situations again in the future. And I appreciate what Trustee Higginson said about exploring or doing some discussions around our process of coming to these decisions and our process of involving the community in these decisions. But that all said, I think it's necessary to maintain this bus route at this time, so I support the motion.
Thank you. So our last speaker on the list, and Trustee O'Neill, I'll come back to you after Trustee Barron, and then call the question at that point. Thank you. So go ahead, Trustee Barron.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I put myself on the list, but as usually happens when this many trustees make comments, most of the items that I wanted to speak to were already brought up and were commented on quite well. And so I guess the only thing I wanted to add to the conversation is, I 100% support this motion. I appreciate Trustee McKay bringing this motion forward. And I do think that this is an example where administrative procedures are helpful to guide us along our way. And then there's always these circumstances where the human factor and, there's just so many different contextual pieces that are at play that need to be considered along with the administrative procedure. So I do appreciate that we're looking at this through the lens of the safety of the students in this specific school and how do we meet their needs and ensuring that this bus stays in place is in the best interest of this community. So I do appreciate the AP and it's how it helps us to ensure that we have sort of a process and a foundation as we move forward, but I also recognize that there are circumstances where we need to be flexible, and I think this is one of them. So thank you for bringing this motion forward, Trustee McKay, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. And back to Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Question, please.
Okay, we'll call the question. So I wonder if Ms. Matthews or perhaps Trustee McKay may read the motion one more time.
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
That the Business Committee recommends that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, include bus route number 16 as a regular route in its transportation busing plan, and that this route will remain a regular route until such time that the annual transportation review identifies a ridership below 50% of bus capacity.
Thank you, Trustee McKay. So the question has been called on the motion. Is there any trustees who are opposed to the motion? I will ask Trustee O'Neill to please let me know if any trustees are opposed in the chat.
No, I see no opposition.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Before we move on, I'd just like to announce that I will be bringing forward 2 motions to the April Business Committee relating to the AP we've been discussing this evening. The general intent is to request that staff consider the process around specifically bus elimination, adding routes and major changes so that it's more clear in the board's role in the approval process. And secondly, to look to encouraging something in the AP relating to public participation so the process is a little bit more defined. So I'll provide those a little bit closer to the meeting so everyone can have a chance to review them with lots of time. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8.3, Secretary Treasurer Walsh with our annual facilities grant. I see a hand. No, I don't see a hand. Trustee McKay, oh,
yes, thank you. Sorry, it was on 8.2 that I wanted to speak one more time. Just around the work that went into the information sheet that we received. I wanted to give my specific thanks for that, but also just in closing on the previous motion that was passed, I look forward to the budget information being brought forward to the board. I think that there's other decisions for us to make to ensure that we're not causing undue hardship on departments to budget when we make decisions and that we're responsible for that. So I just wanted to be clear that I was looking for that information to come back through the budget process as well.
Thank you, and my apologies for not seeing you the first time.
No problem.
And I also see Superintendent Saywell now. Would you like to say a few words, Superintendent Saywell? Again, my apologies.
If I could, thank you. Good evening through you, Chair. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say a few words about Mr. Prevost as well, if I could.
Please.
Thank you. In his 20 years Dave, you've impressed me often. You've exhibited all the attributes of a leader that really matter: honesty, integrity, commitment, passion, empathy, and courage. And that was just this evening. And you also had a way of uniting the board. Well done. I can't imagine a transportation manager who cares more about students. And there's no one I would rather run the roads with on a snowy morning from Nanoose to Ladysmith, trying to determine if buses would be running and schools would be open. And with your great advice, that's the most difficult decision the superintendent has to make. And with your good advice, Dave, I got it right every time. I have immense respect for the work you've done with us, Dave. Thank you for your service. You are an absolute company man. I will miss you. The district will miss you, and all the best in your retirement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Saywell. I really respected the job you've done as well, and it's been my pleasure working with you as well. So thank you so much for those kind words.
Thank you very much, Dave. The one thing I'll just leave us with is the thing that surprised me the very most that you shared with me, Dave, is the, during those cold, snowy mornings, leaving your house so very early in the morning to travel the district to make those tough decisions around busing. And I was very impressed with that. So again, thank you very much, Mr. Prevost. Thank you, Trustee Keller. You're very welcome. Thank you. So moving on to item 8.3 with the annual facilities grant, and I'll turn it over to Secretary Treasurer Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say at the get-go, if anybody starts making a speech about Mr. Hackwood and potential retirement, Karen, can you turn off the meeting right away? So, not happening. But thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hackwood and Mr. Sabo in a moment. But again, this report this evening is intended to outline the priorities of spending for the district's annual facilities grant, which it receives from the Ministry of Education. You'll see that it's not enough, and you'll see that it's included in the long-range facilities plan draft as a recommendation to advocate for more funding. But what I really want to highlight and really want to applaud the work of facilities and learning services is not only the work that they do together to support schools and school priorities, but also that they're constantly taking the board's goals, the board's priorities in the frame of the annual facilities grant to push those goals forward as well. So I'll turn it over to the team, but just express appreciation for that.
Great.
Thank you through the chair. I want to thank Brian for not retiring this year. And I also wanted to thank Brian for his work in managing the requests and the building requirements and arriving at the high value, well-aligned projects for this year's AFG. It is an art and a science to find a really good mix of projects which move all of the district's priorities forward. I know Brian has had to manage more than 1,500 focused requests. There's a lot more need out there, but he got it down, and he's got a process to focus schools. He'll talk about that a little bit as well. So thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Through the chair, Karen, are you going to bring up the slideshow or do I? Thank you, Chair. My name is Brian Hackwood. I'm the Assistant Director of Operations and Planning. And I had a large sigh of relief when Pete didn't give me a retirement speech. So I would like to talk a bit about the planning behind the AFG rather than focusing on the actual items in the AFG. That's in the information sheet. And if there's questions afterwards about specifics, I can certainly ask those. Next slide, please. So I'm really going to talk about the background. The process of doing this year's AFG that's coming up actually started before the previous year's AFG was completed. We started working on the capital plan usually back before March of the previous year. So knowing that, I have to align with what we're aligning with the capital plan that we know is going to be submitted in June. So we're basically a year and 4 or 5 months in the planning to get this going. One of the things that's come up, and we've had it happen in the last couple of years of AFG, is aligning with some major capital projects, and especially with seismic coming on board. And I'll give you a bit of an example. For instance, we have Solaire and Pleasant Valley that are both having seismic. They're both being closed down for a year. So we specifically aligned those schools to have, and AFG, exterior paint is included in AFG. We specifically aligned our exterior paints to be completed at those schools by the time they reopen. Small example. Hammond Bay, same sort of thing, aligning with it, as well as all these before and after daycares that are going in. There's quite a few funding sources that we're aware of. We want to make sure we align with those funding sources. Accessibility is one that we're always have our eyes on. You'll see, for instance, this year there was nothing specific in accessibility in AFG, but yet we're looking after quite a bit of accessibility out of the Learning Services Fund, as well as we're looking at audits at the site, at the schools that we're doing the seismic remediation works at. We're always looking at space planning, which typically with AFG means moving in some portables or fixing the portables that we do move. And there's and we've taught, this is our third year of 5-year school project submissions. So June 30th of each year, we ask that the schools submit their wish list, and that could be an AFG project, could be a school funded project, but to put together basically the next 5 years of what the school would like to see. And Mr. Sybil was correct. There's 35 schools and they each put in 5 requests. Well, suddenly it's a lot of requests, and it represented not far off of $15 million worth of requests for AFG that we actually paired back to the 2.7 that the government actually gives to us. We built in flexibility into AFG. We actually have a $300,000 contingency fund that allows us to react through the year. So we're tied to some projects, but we gave ourselves some wiggle room because there's things always come up through the year, and we try to give ourselves the ability to react very quickly to either failures or something in a school that suddenly has popped up that's very important to the school. Resourcing for AFG is generally, we call it Plan A, Plan B now. Generally, we try to complete our NLPS, or our AFG works with NLPS staff where we can. We call that Plan A. And if Plan A isn't possible, we go to Plan B, which becomes our public tender process. So quite often in the AFG year, we'll see a mix. Typically, I'm dealing with, I think I've dealt with 1 major tender this year, and the rest have been 2 major tenders, and the rest have been basically inside staff working on them. And one of the board goals that we've started to look at fairly hard is we've started doing planning for outdoor learning spaces. Now, this isn't brand new. Outdoor learning spaces have been going on. And as a matter of fact, the Quarterway one has already been approved. That's for the playground expansion. Departure Bay, we're looking at one right now that's been approved in principle. Ladysmith Secondary, we're looking at a development there. And I got to get rid of this bar so I can see the bottom. And then we're about to have, I'm going to be asking the principal shortly to start their June 30th submissions. It's hard to believe how fast these years go. And we'll be looking at the new intake of school requests for June 30, which will then be for the 22-23 AFG. So the whole cycle starts again in just a few months. Thank you, Karen. Next slide. And now I'm open for questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. Are there any trustees or stakeholders who have any questions this evening? I'll start, if that's okay. So the one thing that was interesting is the seismic projects that were identified. So, for this year, Pleasant Valley and Solaire, I believe it is. But as you know, we probably have the number a little bit off, but around 36-ish schools that are in need of seismic upgrades. So my question is there anything that could be done to perhaps look at doing some of that work ourselves, given the fact that this is going to be an ongoing program for, I don't know, many, many years? I'll leave it to staff to decide who wants to respond to that.
I'll defer to Mr. Walsh.
Sure, maybe I'll just have a brief opening. So certainly with respect to AFG, there is no intention of doing work on the seismic. So or any major work beyond tie downs, etc. So the seismic, the work that's associated with the seismic projects in the AFG is because we want to make sure that we're enhancing those schools while the kids are out, it's more efficient, etc. I will turn it over to Mr. Sabo though, because we've been having initial conversations about potentially in-housing some seismic work as we have minor projects, but it would not be funded by the annual facilities grant. But maybe Mr. Sabo can comment briefly.
Yes, thank you. That's a great and interesting question. That's something that we've been working on internally with our management staff and facilities, and so. We have been expanding the capital work that we do. We've been evolving, and we were doing alterations to portables into learning studios, as you're aware. And with our MCFD childcare approvals, we are now constructing before and after care portables. Some utilizing the students from Learning Alternatives and staff, and then we have a second crew that are NLPS staff working on that. We're hoping to build internal capacity, and we are looking towards the high priority requested seismic projects in the capital plan and looking forward to potential approval and discussing if it's possible, can we do those projects in-house? And we're looking at the organization required to do so. And we haven't completed our recommendations to Secretary Treasurer Walsh at this point, but we believe that we are still on track to potentially take advantage of some of those projects and move towards doing some of the seismic in-house. The way we see that benefiting us is that gives us a second stream for smaller seismic projects and not relying on public tenders. It also does change the way we design it, and it may add some flexibility to the seismic upgrade process, thereby proving to the ministry that we may be able to process projects faster. We have been in discussions with the Ministry of Education with respect to the potential to fund seismic in a different way. Those are initial conversations that might flow into the discussion of doing some of it in-house.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabo. That helped me definitely understand the link between our capital funding and our AFG much better. So thank you. That was great. Are there any other trustees or any questions? And perhaps I'll ask. Oh, sorry, Mr. Sabo. I think your hand went up.
Yeah, I did. Thank you very much. Just a little bit more information. So right now, the construction market is quite busy, and because of that. We have had situations where construction companies are trying to hold on to staff, and we have had some difficulty in getting trades. Now we continue to look for creative ways to hire so that we can get trades on staff. However, we have had some delays in getting the appropriate staff in place to do as much in-house work as we would like. I just thought I would throw that in, as it's not all just we'll make the decision and we'll be able to proceed. There are market forces we need to contend with. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Perhaps I'll ask Trustee O'Neill if there are any other questions in the chat in relation to this topic.
There are not.
Thank you very much, Trustee O'Neill. So again, I thank you both for the presentation this evening. I don't see any further questions at this point, so we will move on to item 8.4, childcare planning with Secretary Treasurer Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the brief information sheet on page 67 and 68 just provides an overview of where we're at with respect to childcare in the school district, as well as some potential next steps. And so maybe I'll just briefly go over where we're at. So currently, we did apply for 5 sites, expanded sites, 4 of them to be 0 to 5 and before and after school care, and then 1 of them to be a 0 to 5 only at QQS. The 4 on district-owned lands are proceeding. The QQS one is still in the progress of planning. And so these are the before and after school portion of the first 4 are being built by our staff. The childcare, so the 0 to 5 portion of the infrastructure is going to be ordered. It's being planned by our staff, but we just simply didn't have the people power or the time to get that done in time for delivery. As I think I've reported, we've closed our request for interest and qualification. And so what this is that we are obligated, once we install these units and once we've got that money from the Ministry of Children and Families, that service is going to be provided in district space, the space that's paid for 15 years. And so once it's open, we need a service provider. And so the district at this point has really no ability to provide 0 to 5 childcare for infrastructure management, human resource, a variety of different challenges. And again, with respect to the before and after, it's something that we could possibly provide with respect to the new expansion or expanded spaces. The difficulty, of course, is to make it economic for the partners that are going to provide those spaces. They would need to provide all the service. But we've applied for, I believe it's 4 additional sites. We're just waiting on hearing about them. I think there's some delay. They've done a bunch of announcements, so we're waiting to hear back. And if we do get more, we'll continue along the path that we're on. So what that means is then the LRFP committee, once that gets going, and if indeed it does, the concept will be to create a childcare strategy. And hopefully what we'll see soon is some direction from the Ministry of Education on what their goals are. What I mean by that is, so Ministry of Education has said, or the mandate letter to the minister says, that this area is coming into your jurisdiction by 2023. And one of the things about the Ministry of Education is they could assign it to school districts, or maybe they don't assign it to school districts. We don't know exactly what that looks like at this point. So what we want to do is continue to plan. We note that CUPE has a big interest in providing the service, particularly before and after school care. We know there's a number of labor relations hiccups that would get theoretically in the way that we want to talk through with our local CUPE, and I'm sure there's provincial discussions happening at the same time. Then we want to, again, work with those nonprofit partners who we are bringing in to provide the services in the short term that we've committed to performing, and then again monitor the direction of the ministry. So that's a kind of high level where we're at, and happy to answer any questions with respect to that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Walsh. We do have both Rob Zveer and Trustee Barron on the list. Rob is our first speaker, so if you would go ahead, please, Rob.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Walsh. Yeah, you're aware that we brought this to your attention a while back. And actually, I do believe all the trustees would have received a report from our CUPE people in the summer. It was supposed to go to you about daycare and about us wanting to take it on. It's not a hidden agenda. It was in our provincial framework for which the school district is obligated to work with us on this plan. So they were aware of this before it even started. Now we're getting closer to an end of the year service, and I am a little bit, taken back in the fact that when I read in there that there's not a possibility in it, and K to 12 in the expense and the human resources that may have to go towards that. Not talking about the 0 to 5 because that is a little bit more expansion, but we would love to be the providers of everything. If they're on our sites, we are a closed shop in our own nation. It's our cert that we have with the school district. So if the school district is providing services for other people in a way that could be different than what we do, and we sublet the schools out because it was not the intention of it, these are brand new buildings going on our sites. They're new providers that could be there for a long period of time. Most people set up shop in the school district knowing that it's not a permanent space. These are permanent spaces. We know that. And my question really is to the trustees is, you are the keepers. You take your advice through thing, but it's up to you to set the policies and procedures for which which this is going to be funneled through. Asking for funding through the ministry and stuff is just going to be part of the challenge, and of course we will work toward those goals. But nothing prevents CUPE and the school district, along with the trustees, to build a composite piece that we could go forward for, knowing that possibly we could convince the Ministry of Education, or through whatever ministry it's going to be still, to provide that additional funding to take this on. It is a big push. They wouldn't have been giving us money to put modulars in there if there wasn't a need to say that they were also going to support the spaces. To have empty buildings is not going to be profitable if a private outfit doesn't have the ability to bring the clientele into the buildings. We are a good source. We have people, we can provide full-time jobs. So I really want to understand when I read in there that it's a resource problem. I believe this is very crucial, and there is a very need to get to the bottom of this, even if it is during this time that we need to find that ability to make this happen. So,
thank you, Mr. Zver. If I may just ask a question to Mr. Walsh, are we able to share the report with trustees that Mr. Zver is referring to? We probably received it, but I don't need an answer, Mr. Walsh. I just I'm interested in knowing what Mr. Zver was referring to. My memory may not be serving me well right now. I just don't recall what was there. Okay, so moving on to Trustee Barron. She's the next on our list.
Through the chair, thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to hear some of our CUPE representative Rob Zver's comments that helped clarify a little bit. I did have just a quick contextual question, and then, but it's not my primary question, so maybe I'll just use it as a follow-up, my primary question. My first question was just around, you were talking about the request for interest and qualifications now being closed. Is that specific, and I apologize if it's already in there, but is that specific to the 0 to 5 range?
No, it is, sorry, through Mr. Chair, it's specific to the new locations. So as noted in the report, one of the difficulties of going out and only offering the opportunity to provide 0 to 5 is that it's not economic. So like the cost to provide the services to the very young children is often offset by the before and after school care. Right, so for instance, if we were to proceed on an in-house basis for the before and after, staff would still come back and recommend that it would be at a site that's not getting the new facilities, that it would be at a site that just needs before and after, or we apply only for before and after. I think that because of the economics of the young model, that's why making the before and after and the 0 to 5 combined make it doable for those providers.
Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Barron?
Yes. If you could see my paper, I have a bit of a mind map happening here trying to understand this process. And one thing that I'm trying to understand a little bit better is that there was a request for interest and qualifications that you've said is now closed for nonprofits specifically, is what I read in the report. We're also seeing in the report that the Ministry of Education is taking responsibility for childcare by 2023. And we don't currently know what this might look like. And so what I'm trying to understand is two pieces: why we would put out a request for interest and qualifications now, specifically for nonprofits, without knowing what the ministry is going to be providing to us for further information. And because I'm trying to understand that, because are we limiting ourselves and the potential capacity to use our CUPE staff by putting this out there now? Because what I'm wondering is it possible that the Ministry of Education could say, here's what it's going to look like, and we may have the capacity, and now we're locked in with a nonprofit, which is great, of course, but my preference as an individual trustee is that we utilize our staff internally, our CUPE staff first, and then seek outside options. And so I'm just trying to understand our process and if we're limiting ourselves to potentially utilize our CUPE staff as a result.
Sure. So I could speak to, I'll maybe repeat the why first, and that's because we are obligated to provide these services really starting in September, a little bit of delay in infrastructure building. And if we don't, we owe the money back for each individual site. So really there's the reality of, even if we wanted to go and provide all of the services in September, for us to get to start an entirely new sector, particularly for the 0 to 5. I understand that the before and after would be a little bit easier to organize, but to do that from scratch would be incredibly difficult. If the Ministry of Education changes things over, well, we want to, for the providers that are coming into the initial ones, we would want to give them some kind of assurance that they'll be there for a while. But if this statutory responsibility shifts to the district, we'll have the ability to be able to, move at that time. The other thing about the request for interest and qualification, it doesn't guarantee any future site. So the idea right now is that, and as far as we know, and if the childcare strategy decides and the board decides that, this is too much to try, but the way that we see it going is that we will be applying to every school over the next 10 years or what have you. And so, at some point, we're going to have more opportunities for new spaces to be able to provide those services if that's the direction we go. So would it limit our ability to go back to Chase River as an example and tell whoever the provider is there, we want to take it over? If there wasn't a statutory requirement to do so, I think it would be pretty difficult for us to say, okay, sorry, just because it's our preference, we want you to go after 2 years. But there's going to be many more opportunities going down the line. And if we became the grade -5 to 12 sector, then clearly those would come into our responsibility.
Great, thank you. So we have Trustee Stanley on the list and then Trustee O'Neill. So go ahead, Trustee Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, you asked my questions, so I will pass. I was wondering about the report too. I don't recall seeing the report, so if it could be passed to all trustees, that would be great.
Thank you, Trustee Stanley. Moving on to Trustee O'Neill.
Thank you. Well, through the chair, let me just say I'm always so excited when we land on this topic. It's definitely a passionate topic for me. And there's no doubt that there's great challenge within this, essentially building a new system within a system. So I concur. I do want to give a shout out to CUPE and the work of other labor organizations who have really been prioritizing childcare in the larger community, and how greatly it fits within our schools and the systems that are in place. And I guess I remain optimistic that this will be fully placed under the Ministry of Education. I do have some questions about recruitment and retention, and I can't help but think that, some of our significant challenges, I mean, it's outlined in this letter and our memo, and the bigger picture is, while I want to support and look at everything being handled internally, I am aware that there are significant challenges within the ECE, early childhood care sector, and those supports that, those that have that qualification within our district as well, who could potentially be doing this work. I'm just wondering if you can expand a bit on that piece of it, or if I'm getting a little bit too much into the weeds here on the sort of labor component. Thank you.
Sure, and Ms. Trick is here as well, and I'm not sure she wants to come on and talk a little bit about those particular challenges.
Yes, thank
Please.
you. Thank you through the chair. So Trustee O'Neill, thank you for that question, because that's exactly the concerns that we have currently in HR. I mean, I think it's no secret that you know, in terms of our EAs, there's been a province-wide shortage for a number of years. We've experienced at this district, as many districts have. We continue to look at creative ways of filling our positions. I will share with the trustees tonight that our failure to fill rate, even as we navigate through this year, is high, and so we have an average since September 2020, so for this school year, of 14 EAs, that positions that we can't fill per day. That's the average. And you know, it's interesting now, we are recruiting we're doing everything we can do to recruit right now. So for example, there's been some new candidates that have come to Nanaimo in this last year, and we just grab them and we run with them as soon as we can. The thing is too, that I'm super proud of this district because we don't compromise our standards on these positions. These are critical positions. So we do this and we've managed to uphold our standards throughout. However, we continue to address the issue of you know, stabilizing the staffing so that we can deal with the absences. And then of course, you know, here we are in this pandemic year, which has added another layer to it, in particular on this year, because there have been some deferments on our graduates from VIU. You know, there's those kinds of things that we're also dealing with. So, you know, we continue to work on it. We have subcommittees, and you know, we just have to address it. But we do appreciate the opportunity to continue to stabilize and work on our internal issues, and also see what happens at the provincial level from a labor relations perspective.
Go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, and furthermore, I might just add to it, we don't want to be all negative in that sense, that there's real opportunity as well. Like, we see the opportunity of, you know, potentially being able to use more hours as incentive to come to our district and be employed. Like, there's lots of opportunities there, but I guess the issue, of course, with what Ms. Trick has raised is that, like, imagine we have a before and after in a school that has 3 absences and we can't fill them, and we have no one to, you know, to watch those kids as they're getting dropped off. It's an entirely new level of complexity and stress that we're going to have to work through with our union partners as we, you know, as we continue these discussions. I think that's what might reflect some of the, like, okay, well, let's just do this. Why aren't we just doing this? And it's because, you know, we need to make sure that whatever we do is sustainable and is going to be a model that's going to work, you know, really forever. So it's not all negative. There's lots of opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh, and I will offer a follow-up to Trustee O'Neill.
Well, thank you, and I think you can see in the background, you know, I've got a one that's entering kindergarten next year. I find myself on a wait list. So as an independent parent, you know, and going through this system myself, I have to remain optimistic, Secretary Treasurer, but I am aware of what the realities are, and, you know, wait lists is another big one. And so I'll go back to my main point, which is, you know, undoubtedly this is a challenge, but I think our district is up for it. So I'm really encouraged to continue to have these conversations about what this process can look like as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill. Next on the list is Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. I'll just be quick and say that all of these challenges that have been identified tonight are, you know, particularly including the one about this significant amount of staff time that's being taken right now. The you know, staffing shortages is why we do have a request into the ministry to develop a comprehensive childcare strategy themselves to help and try to address these things, so we're not making these small iterative changes that have unintended consequences on the ability of districts to also meet their main goal of providing strong and robust public education to the citizens of their community. So this is a complex problem, and for all the reasons pointed out tonight, I think it does require our special attention and really utilizing our co-governance agreement with the ministry to ensure that what comes out of this is something that's really strong and has the ability to actually improve the education system, because there's lots of really great synergies if we can get it right. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson. I'm next on the list, and I just like to say this is something that's really, really important for us, this work. I see there being so much opportunity to have a model of seamless childcare where students starting out in daycare can transition seamlessly to kindergarten and beyond. So this is great work. I look forward to developing the strategy and looking at what opportunities there may be to utilize some of our own staff. My question is, and perhaps through to Secretary Treasurer Walsh, I wasn't quite sure, and I don't have the report in front of me because of the technical issues I'm having, but are we at this time building a daycare facility as well, or is that coming later?
So through to you, Mr. Chair, we are building all of it in the sense that we are, so at 4 of the sites, Forest Park, Chase River, Ladysmith Primary, and Mr. Sabo is there to add to that. Oh, and sorry, in Rock City, we are going to be having 0 to 5 in modular units that are being purchased through a request for proposal. And then we are building the before and after school care infrastructure ourselves. It's slightly smaller. And so we thought that that's a good way to experiment with the in-housing. At QQS, what we're looking at is the 0 to 5 care only.
And I see that Mr. Sabo had his hand up there. I'll give him an opportunity to weigh in.
Yes, thank you. And I would just indicate that the procurement vehicle for the daycares is not number specific. So if at some point during this next procurement period, the district sees fit to build daycares or has staff or it fits into the organization, we can do that, and we expect to have that flexibility built into our plans into the future. And we think it's important that if we're going to increase capital forces, that we make sure we have that flexibility to keep those forces employed and organize the projects in such a way that we've got an even demand on our resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one follow-up. Knowing that we're working towards daycare for 0 to 5, am I safe to assume that there's more to it than just putting a building on the site? Like in terms of licensing, are there different requirements for outdoor spaces, and do they have to be separated in any way from the rest of the facility? I wonder if you could respond to any of those type of facilities related improvements that might be a little bit different for the 0 to 5 than what we would typically see for the before and after school care.
Mr. Sabo?
Yeah, so the 0 to 5 has 2 components. It's got a 0 to 3 infant toddler section, and it's got a 3 to 5 preschool, and they are separate. There are some common areas. Licensing does have to be obtained by the provider, and licensing, I believe, is dependent on the programs offered. So if you have a 0 to 3, or you have a 3 to 5, they're 2 separate licenses, or you might have a multi-age depending on the number of students. So you'll be able to go from 0 to 5 at multi-ages depending on the numbers. I don't know all the details. The unit itself for those, I believe it's 12 infant toddler and 16 0 to 5. 3 to 5, and capacity in that unit. The unit itself is about 200 meters, or a triple wide portable by 60 feet each section, where the before and after daycare is a normal double wide that's 60 feet long. I'll pause there.
No, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Sabo, Mr. Walsh. I'll stop there. Thank you. I wonder if there are any other trustees or stakeholders who have any questions regarding the childcare planning. I'll just ask Trustee O'Neill if there's anything in the chat.
There is not anything in the chat.
Thank you. And I see Secretary Treasurer Walsh has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just maybe make a final comment, just to say that we know the board's commitment to using our forces and our QP members as much as possible. And on the infrastructure side, you can certainly see that commitment to trying to in-house as much as possible. So we know that commitment is there, and it's kind of top of mind in all of the discussions that we're having on the administrative side.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh and Mr. Sabo. Thank you for your work. We'll move on to item number 9, correspondence referred from the regular board meeting. I don't believe we have any this evening. Item 10 and 11, nothing, no new unfinished business, or sorry, new unfinished business and no new business. Nothing for information. What I'll do in terms of questions is I understand there's some questions from the public in our Q&A. Can I ask perhaps, I see that Secretary Treasurer Walsh has his hand up.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, Ms. Matthews just posted that there's no official questions. I think that the earlier notes were kind of comments based off of what was occurring live during the meeting.
Okay, so we have no official questions to raise at this time, is my understanding. Just to confirm, that's correct, Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Thank you. So barring no questions, can I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Trustee O'Neill. And do we have a seconder? If someone could pop up. Trustee Stanley. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? I kind of doubt it, but I'll ask Trustee O'Neill, is there anyone in the chat that's opposed?
No.
The motion is carried and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for your patience this evening as I did my very best with a last minute unexpected technological disaster, and I hope that I did okay for everyone tonight. So have a good evening. Thank you.
Good job.
Nice job, Greg. Good work. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.